Listen to the radio. Harry and Edna's want to show you heard it from the Three Bells.
What-o, Harry?
And what-o, Edna, and welcome to Harry and Edna on the wireless as we broadcast facing dear old England.
What-ho?
And welcome to Harry and Edna on the wireless, where there is a little bit of a nautical theme, partly because we have a little beach hut and I've locked us out.
Yeah, well, we carried our beach barbecue down there and bits and bobs to start packing out the beach hut again, ready for the heat wave that I'm sure will be upon us any minute now. And well, we got one lock off, and then Harry proceeded to break the key in the second lock. So
well, we did oil it up.
We did.
Basically, there's big padlocks in the front of the beach hut, and I've snapped one off. So if you see someone walking along with giant bolt cutters along the south coast, it's me.
Yes. Needless to say, we had to carry all our stuff back again.
We did. But this fits in rather well. I see it is seamless because today's show has a very Dunkirk feel to it. And because we recently went to the Imperial War Museum in Duxford, thanks to our good friend Esther Blaine.
What-ho, Esther?
And we got to speak to... Who do you get... Well, I didn't get to speak to anybody. You did.
I did. I got to interview, and I had a brilliant time interviewing. And he is an author called Joshua Levine, and he wrote the book Dunkirk, to which they then based the film on.
And this is the big international blockbuster film.
Yeah, the Dunkirk film. The big blockbuster Dunkirk film. And he was a really, really interesting chap, as you'll hear shortly. I was going to say, we haven't got him on the phone, have we? We sent him to the phone box.
No.
I was on a different. I was bobbing on a different wave then.
No, because you were in the Imperial War Museum in Duxford.
I know.
Thanks to our friend Esther.
Yes,
and she arranged. And she arranged this for you. Do you remember?
I do now. I went off on a completely different train of thought then. That's dangerous.
Esther,
obviously.
You really made an impression.
No, it wasn't Esther that made... Joshua made the impression. He was so interesting. I could chat to him for hours.
You're digging yourself deeper.
I've come back on track again.
No, because Esther's listening and she's going, oh, right.
No.
If that's what young Edna feels.
No, it's not at all. It's Harry trying to cause mischief, as usual.
No, I don't.
Oh, yes, you do. They're back to the seaside.
I don't think that's the case.
What-ho?
I was a little bit late coming in then because I had to go and get my bolt cutters.
Yeah. Well, we have had a bit of a beach hut disaster whereby we can't actually get into the beach hut. So we need to sort of some resolution to this, Harry.
We do, but we did take... I mean, it does sound very modern. We did take our barbecue down to the beach hut to store it for the season, and then we had to bring it back. But the barbecue liked a good walk along the south coast.
It did. It was probably a bit weird to people as we took our buckets and barbecue for a little walk. I'm sure they thought it was quite strange, but there we go. It's Harry and I for you.
Well, other people walk dogs. I like to walk catering equipment along the seafront.
Yes. Can I just say, that track was very French. Is that sort of in the theme of sort of Dunkirk?
Well, I was thinking that, yes, I'm trying to link it all together.
Yeah, it's getting us in the mood, sort of feeling...
We are. It's a bit of a wartime-esque theme after this.
Yes.
You'll find out when you listen to the tracks.
Is it?
But it's very wartime 1940.
Oh, I like where
today.
You're going with this.
You see,
Gosh, these programmes aren't just thrown together, you know.
No. I said that to Esther when she was on the phone when that record was playing. I said, Esther, you won't believe what she just said to you. Anyway, I have to do 1940s stuff for you.
Yeah. See,
I'm not stirring it at all.
No, you're not. No.
No. So after we're going to play a track. Mm-hmm. It's a lovely day tomorrow.
Is that a wartime track?
It is actually one of my favourites from this period. I do like this one, but it's by Denny Dennis, and it's a version I haven't heard for ages. In fact, to be honest, I didn't even know I had the record.
Oh, until we
were researching this programme, I didn't even realise I had it. And then we're going to speak to. We're going to whiz you off to Cambridgeshire for IWM Duxford, where you got to meet Joshua Levine, is it? Levine?
It's one of them, Levine. Levine, I think.
Yeah, and so he will be next. So we'll hear you in a completely different location.
Yes, the bit of background banter, I think, is going on as well.
What-ho?
I'm here today with Joshua Levine, author of Dunkirk, the history behind the major motion picture. So, Joshua, can you tell our listeners why you've written this book?
This book basically exists alongside the film, the big film that came out this year. I originally, several years ago, I edited an oral history of Dunkirk, and the director, Christopher Nolan, was given that book for Christmas, and often people, my books are often given to sort of people, uncles, for Christmas. I never know if they're read. This one obviously was, because he then got in touch with me and asked if I would work with him on the film, which I was delighted to do. So I worked on the movie, but then also wrote this book to go alongside, because a lot of people are going to see this film who really have absolutely no idea what Dunkirk. I mean, somebody on Twitter wrote when the film was planned, "Who is Dunkirk?" That's the sort of level you're dealing with some people. So this is a book to explain who is Dunkirk.
So when you got that phone call, what was going through your mind? Was it a kind of, this might not become anything, or was it, oh my goodness, what am I about to embark on?
It's interesting. First of all, I'm not. I love films, but I'm not great on recent director, so I didn't know a great deal about Christopher Nolan's. I'd heard the name, but also when you write books, when you do what I do, you get a lot of approaches, and you're right. I mean, most of them don't come to anything. So you can't be sure. No, I thought this sounds interesting, but I didn't really think much beyond that.
So then how did it unfold thereafter? Did you have meetings with him? Did the sort of penny drop that, wow, this is actually happening and this is going to be something really rather large?
Yes, he came to the house and he gave me the script to keep overnight to read, and I began to realise that, yes, this was going to be large. But, in those early days, all there was a script. There was a 76-page script, and whatever project you're doing, whether it's a play in a fringe theatre or a Hollywood movie, a script is a script. Yeah. And so I was reading it and just fascinated to see his view of it, and try to imagine what this was going to turn into, how he was going to realise the words I was reading. It was really interesting to see it, from the earlier stages and to watch it grow.
For you, something that was good to see films doing it from the perspective of the guys that were actually on the beach, rather than sort of some fantasy romantic drama, but it was actually hardcore what actually happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was really exciting, actually, to see it portrayed, not in any sort of glamorous or, idealised way, but to see it absolutely as, imagined. I mean, this was not, it's not a documentary, but as imagined through the eyes of ordinary people who were there. Yeah. And yes, really exciting, because, these are ultimately, the story. I mean, years ago, when I started writing, not that many years ago, 9-10 years ago, I would go into the archives of the Imperial War Museum, for example, and listen to people who'd been interviewed in the 70s and 80s. And when, the people who'd been interviewed early on, the First World War veterans, they were asked of their experiences, and they were embarrassed to give them. They would sometimes even say, why do you want to know? Yeah. Yeah. There are history books, or they would start talking about the strategy of a particular battle, and they'd have to be told, no, it's your story I want, and they couldn't see why they were important. And so I think it is great that nowadays we realise the importance of the individual. The story, the event couldn't have taken place without these individuals, one upon another of them, doing what it was that they did. So, yeah, really exciting to see a film coming from that perspective.
And when you were listening to these interviews that had been recorded, and there was this feeling coming over that, well, why do you want to know my story? Why is it important? Was that because these guys just felt they were doing their bit, and it wasn't about them in particular, it was about the job that they were doing?
Yes, I think so, because they came from a different age, really. They came from an age where, life was about duty rather than the individual, and it was duty rather than rights. And so they did what they were told, and they were part of a bigger story that was, nothing to do with them. And something happened. You could see in those interviews, something shifted, and I think it was in the 80s, really, where, suddenly, yes, actually, I am important.
Yeah.
And the interviews started to change, and people, took much greater pride in what they had personally done. They realized that people were really interested in their own, experiences, and so yes, I think that is it. That you're dealing really with a generation of people for whom life was more about duty than it was about what can I get.
Yeah. Was there any sort of, not regret, but any fear that maybe they just wouldn't make it?
Absolutely. I mean, talking to one man, yes, I could tell you about lots of people, but one man, Garth Wright, who's still with us and as strong as an ox, and I'm hoping to travel to Dunkirk with him next year, in fact, and he told me about digging trenches in the dunes, and lying in the trenches and being utterly convinced he was going to die, that he wasn't going to get home from the beaches. And so we're talking about the end of May 1940, and here he is now. He was on the red carpet at the film, and he was throwing his arms wide to the crowd who were cheering him, and I think it was Harry Styles on one side and him on the other, and he was taking the cheers of the crowd, and it's how wonderful is that not only is he still here, he's absolutely, after many years as a bus driver in Plymouth, here he is, and he's in the sunshine.
Yeah, wow. And for these guys that were on these beaches and the story that unfolded, you couldn't make that up, could you?
No. Well, you could, but it wouldn't be such a good story. No. I mean, it's the reality and the contrast between their experiences, and that to me is in some ways the most interesting thing. There's no one story, They had the experience they had, and if sometimes you suggest, someone will tell you something that they saw, and then you suggest it to someone else, and they'll say no, that never happened. Well, it all happened. And we shouldn't be narrow-minded about the past. There is a story that tends to make its way down through time, but it's never the whole story.
What ho?
There you go. That was Jack Hilton and We'll Meet Again. See, now that's a version you weren't expecting, wasn't it?
It wasn't, and I'm guessing that wasn't Vera Lynn either.
To be honest, I don't know. It doesn't say.
No, well, no. It didn't sound like Vera Lynn, not from what I'm... Unless it's because it's a different version, it just isn't what I'm thinking it should sound like. It's a bit like, what was the other one we played? Oh, It's a Lovely Day Tomorrow. I do love that song, but I'd never heard of that version. I was amazed. It's one of the joys of having the record collection or the shellac collection we have. Yeah, every now and again we do go through it and realise we've got some hidden gems.
Oh, I never knew about that one. And same with Jack Hilton doing We'll Meet Again.
I know, it's very orchestral, that one. It was lovely.
It is different, but I like it.
Yeah.
Might play it again.
Yeah.
Another day.
We approve of that. When we do another wartime themed type show.
Certainly. Because after all, this is Harry and Edna on the wireless. And you're hearing us by the radio. What-o, people in radio land. But did you know you can also hear us on demand via internet streaming, downloadable podcast and YouTube? Indeed, if there's a way to get us out there, we're going to take it.
Do you know, Harry, though, sometimes people do contact us and say, there was no music on your show.
Do they?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, but they haven't got it completely wrong. They haven't gone completely mad. They're just listening to the download podcast.
Yeah, or on YouTube, because due to contractual reasons, they don't have any music.
No.
But if you want to hear the music, and obviously listening to the radio is the best way.
Yes.
But if we're not on the radio and you feel like an urge to find out what's going on in the current vintage scene...
Or you'd like to hear us back to back, how about that? Not box setting as the modern kids of today do on the DV.
Well, you could do, because the entire back catalogue is available.
So you can radio set them.
Yes.
Maybe, I don't know. We'll think of a term.
Wireless set them. You could do. All you got to do is harryandedna.co.uk and you'll hear the current show and all the other previous back catalogue, they're all there. Loads of them.
Yes.
Loads of them.
Could fill your whole day, should you wish.
It could do. Now, going back to earlier on, we were talking about being by the sea, and we've rusted up our the padlocks to our beach hut. And you were saying about, even when we take the boat to the Isle of Wight,
yes,
which, let's be honest, that can take up to an hour, and it's not a big stretch of water.
No. And you can at least see the other side of the coast, can't you? So you're not sailing out into nowhere land.
No, exactly. Yes, that's right, because when we go to the Isle of Wight, you've seen all the lights, because we usually do it at night, and you see all the lights getting closer and closer. Yes,
but at least you can sort of see where you're headed. And I was saying to Harry, whilst the interview was playing, I just couldn't comprehend, because some of these boats, as he was saying, were so small that everybody just felt like they had to do their bit. So you didn't have to have a big boat and take it over to Dunkirk. But could you imagine, just if you're in a small boat, just... it'd give me the heebie-jeebies sailing from the mainland to the Isle of Wight. Imagine getting in your boat and heading off in the vague direction of Dunkirk, not quite knowing what you're going to find.
I don't know if it's still there, because they revamped the Imperial War Museum in Lambeth in London a few years ago. But in the old display in the foyer was the smallest boat that went over, and it was basically a rowing boat.
Wow. But imagine just, the waves that you've been fighting against. And
I get a bit hairy.
Seeing all those beaches on fire.
Exactly, when we're in the little rubber dinghy and the wave comes over.
Yeah.
Imagine
you're rowing against the tide.
That all the way to Dunkirk.
Yeah. Oh, it just amazed me when we were talking about it. And then when we were down by our beach hut earlier, and you just look out across the Solent, and you just think, gosh, imagine getting in your boat and just sailing over to Dunkirk. Must have just... there must have been a real drive and impetus to save our troops, to sort of face that.
Very, very poignant, to say the least.
Yeah.
But we got more of Joshua.
Yeah.
I'm going to say his name wrong, aren't I? Levine. There we go. I knew I'd say it wrong. Sorry, Joshua. Honestly, we're best mates. we are.
Can't remember how to pronounce his surname the right way. So we've given you all three variations.
Well,
Pick one.
I get the same. I get called Dickinson and Dick Ensign.
Dickinson. There you go, there's your third.
Anyway, we're going to have more Joshua after this particular track.
What ho?
The fact that it's a true story makes it so rich and so poignant and as you say, diverse. I mean, it's not one story. You tend, receive wisdoms come down to us, but they're never the whole story. They may not be myth exactly, but they're never the whole story. The whole story is always much more nuanced, much more interesting, much more multi-layered, faceted. And that's very true about the Dunkirk story. There's so much to it that, people haven't focused on, and it's wonderful to have a chance to do that. I mean, it varies, actually. I mean, none of them are the same. I suppose if I'm looking for themes, a lot of them still talk about the fact that, it was a defeat. Mm-hmm. They came home and they were, they came home as a sort of trampled army, and they were embarrassed and they were surprised at the reception that they received, the sort of, outpouring of relief they received from people back at home. So, that tends to be a theme. Not everyone says that, but, that tends to be a theme. And their experiences on the beaches, their experiences on the retreat, their experiences on ships coming home, also different. One man, Humphrey Breedon, who was with one of the Irish regiments, he said that that he got on board the ferry that was bringing him back, and the stewards were still on board, dressed in their white coats, and he was slumped in the corner, and somebody came up to him and said, "Can I get you anything, sir?" And he said, I don't suppose I could have a beer. And the man said, "I'm sorry, sir, the law says we have to wait till we're 3 miles offshore before I can serve you alcohol." And he just looked, he thought, this was the ship bringing him back. And he thought, if we can be like this, we can't lose. No. If this can carry on. Yeah. I think absolutely wonderful. So, that there's every facet of humanity in this story, so, yeah.
And we often hear the story of the boats that came over, and again, hearing that from a first-person perspective, was there that relief of the boats coming over? Did they really look at it and consider that that would actually help?
Well, there was. I mean, the idea of the flotilla, this of little ships arriving is true. I mean, they did arrive en masse, and it was, to a lot of people, a huge boost, because the little ships. The point of the little ships wasn't, what people have to realise is, the point of the little ships wasn't to take people home. People, you had huge numbers of soldiers on the beaches. The beaches were the water was very shallow. The larger ships, the naval ships, the ferries, the big ships couldn't come ashore. So these little ships, the point of them was to bring people from the beaches to the larger ships. Right. So some people absolutely did get home on these little ships, but for the most part, they were ferrying people backwards and forwards. Well, not backwards. There wasn't much point going backwards. And ferrying people from the beaches to the bigger ships. So. And without them, people wouldn't have got off. Yeah. So, hugely important, actually. And people do remember seeing them and thinking, thank goodness.
Yeah.
What ho?
Collating all this fascinating information, all these facts, details, first-hand accounts. How do you then begin to put that into a book?
Oh, blimey. Experience, I suppose. I used to be a lawyer. I mean, I was a criminal barrister for a long time, and I suppose that was quite a good training for this. I was able to take a lot of information on board, and try and sort of set it out in a logical way, in an imaginative way, in a way that makes sense, but gets people interested. So it's all about disseminating information, really, finding it in the first place, and then deciding where it's best used to form an argument or to create a picture.
So when you're collating and you're trying to edit it down and put it together, does it become a sort of personal battle yourself to sort of, because you want to keep it all in, or do you have to be quite hard on yourself?
There's this expression in writing, the difficulty of killing your babies. The idea being, you've sweated to research this material, to write this material, to do this material, and then an editor comes along and says, no, you don't want that, you get rid of that. And it's really painful. You lose perspective. It's mine. I don't want to get rid of it. So absolutely, you've got to, you've got to be aware that, just because you've written something, it doesn't make it sacred.
And so this is available in, I'm assuming, all good bookshops?
All good bookshops. Is available on the internet. It seems to be quite widely available in a lot of countries as well. You can get it in China now, so I'm not saying you should go to China to get it, but it's there. I'm very, very, very pleased with it, and it's an honour to work on the film.
And the image that you have on the front, is that an image from the actual film itself?
That's an image from the film, yeah. Please don't ask me when it was done or how it was done or who that is.
Do you think that sums up Dunkirk?
I do, yeah. I mean, I think it was a pretty grim experience for most people. Not for everybody. Everyone had a different experience. But I think that gives a sense of, the horror that a lot of people did endure, and some didn't.
So how do you go on from writing a book like Dunkirk?
No idea. I have absolutely no idea. I've got an idea for my next book, so I'm putting together the proposal now, and the publisher will either like it and want to go ahead with it, or he won't. She won't. Hopefully I'll do another book, maybe a bit more. I mean, who knows? I'm a freelance, and it's about as certain as
as people's future on the beach.
Exactly.
Well, thank you very much for speaking to us today, Joshua. It's absolutely fascinating. So it's Joshua Levine, and the book is called Dunkirk: The History Behind the Major Motion Picture. Thank you.
And I know that you do radio of the 1940s. If you could stick some Al Bowley on, I'd be delighted.
We will do that for you next. Thank you.
What ho?
There you go. As requested, a bit of Al Bowley and What I Like About You.
Yeah, we do like a bit of Al Bowley, don't we?
We do, and so does Joshua.
Yes.
A man of amazing taste.
Yes, yeah. Did he sing Sweet and Lovely?
Who, Al Bowley?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Just checking my memory. That's why we like Al Bowley, because he sang that song, one of our favourites.
It is one of our favourite songs, I must admit. Now, it's come to that time, it's coming to end the show.
No.
And what is amazing about our show is that since we started the new season, we were always meant to end on this particular track.
Yeah.
And because we natter so much...
No, us? Surely not.
We always end up cutting it.
Yeah. So it's really lovely. We've actually not nattered quite so much as we usually do. We've managed to add it in. Unless, of course, we run over and you hear something completely different at the end of the show.
Well, you could do, yes. If you suddenly hear...
Yeah.
It just means we run out of time.
Yeah, okay.
If there's just a big gap of silence. But it's a chap called Ben Walters, and we haven't seen him for a while, have we?
No.
But he's a chap on the contemporary scene, isn't he?
He is, and he is somebody we've met a few times now, and just got to know and love his music as well as him. He's an absolutely lovely
He's
lovely
a boogie-woogie player, really, isn't he?
Boogie-woogie piano player, and he is just so amazingly talented. It's unbelievable.
It must be a nightmare if you ever work with him, though, as a professional, because he goes on stage with no stage set. He just calls out to the audience and goes, "What do you want to hear?" And you just yell out a song. I want to hear Aqua, Barbie Girl.
No, I think he has to. That was one of the best shows I'd ever seen him at, was where he was just doing, the whole show was yell out a tune and...
I'll play it.
Sort of, but then there was a few, wasn't there, where somebody would shout something out and he'd do the first chord and then he'd stop and then he'd go, "Oh, hold on a sec," and then he'd do the first chord again and you could see, and he'd be like, "No, can't remember it. Next." And it was just that, just the amount of musical knowledge he retains in his head is incredible, and that's just what blew me away.
Yeah, and he also, because he plays with a band, doesn't he? And he's thinking they haven't got a clue what's coming next either, do they?
And it would be some kind of lovely vintage tune that he would have to play, and they would put their slant on it, but it was, you must have such a repertoire of musical knowledge in your head. All his band must. It was just absolutely incredible. So
if you get the chance, do see Ben Walters, because I'll be honest, I don't want to sound negative, but I don't think his album, which he gave us, does him justice. I think he's far better live.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
And this song, I think it's his own compilation, actually. It's a track called The Wasp.
Ooh.
Which is, and it starts off a bit rocky, so we're going to get complaints again about playing modern songs.
But we must quickly say he's of the apprenticeship of Jules Holland, so he's in that league of Jules Holland.
Oh yeah, he plays with Jules Holland, and
he was on his show once.
He's been on his show a few times, and I'm going to. I don't know these modern pop bands very well, but one of his band members is often the drummer of the Rolling Stones. And I don't know who that is.
No, but somebody...
But I know the Rolling Stones are quite popular these days.
Yes, yeah, well, they're up and coming, aren't they? An up-and-coming young boy band.
Yes, I know they play. And who's the guy that played Bertie Wooster?
Hugh Laurie.
Hugh Laurie, because he's a bit of he likes a bit of music, and he plays a lot with him too.
Yeah.
But I think that's just for pleasure.
Yeah, but it just shows you the quality of showmanship that he does as well.
So we've nattered so much, there'll be about 3 seconds of this song. So it's just time for me to say... Tinkly donk.
And a toodle pip from me.
What ho!